Today, we're going to dive into one of the biggest ideas to ever shape our modern world: liberalism. Seriously, it's a philosophy that touches pretty much everything, from our laws to our economies. But to really get it, we have to ask a simple question: where did all these ideas about freedom and rights even come from? So let's start right there. Have you ever really stopped to think about why we care so much about things like free speech or why we hold elections? It's easy to take them for granted, but these ideas didn't just pop up out of thin air. A whole lot of them trace their roots right back to the political philosophy of liberalism.
To appreciate just how revolutionary liberalism was, we kind of have to turn back the clock. We need to understand the world it grew out of. A world where the idea of you having individual rights, well, it just wasn't really a thing.
For centuries, if you were an ordinary person, you lived under an absolute monarch, a king or queen who had total power, often claiming they got it directly from God. In a system like that, any rights you had were basically gifts from the government, and a gift that's given can be taken away. Your station in life wasn't about what you could do, but who you were born to.
But then, something began to change. A huge shift in thinking swept across Europe. We call it the Enlightenment. And it started to challenge everything about those old ways of doing things, proposing a totally new and, frankly, radical way of seeing the world.
And these weren't just ideas being debated in fancy coffee houses either. They lit a fire that fueled actual world-changing revolutions. You see it in England, where Parliament's power was asserted over the king. You see it in the American Revolution, building a new nation on liberal ideals. And you absolutely see it in the French Revolution, with its powerful cry for liberty, equality, fraternity.
So, who were the brains behind this incredible new philosophy? Who were the thinkers that really built this new idea of freedom from the ground up? Let's meet a few of the main architects.
First up, you've got to know this name: John Locke, an English philosopher who's pretty much known as the father of modern liberalism. His ideas were a direct shot at the power structures of his day.
Now, at the very heart of Locke's thinking was an idea that was, for its time, completely mind-blowing: natural rights. He argued that every single person is born with certain rights to life, to liberty, and to property. And here's the kicker: these rights come from nature or God, not from kings or governments. It completely flipped the old way of thinking on its head.
So if that's true, if we're all born with these rights, then what's the point of even having a government? Well, according to Locke, a government has one and only one legitimate job: to protect those natural rights you already have. And this part is so important, it can only do that if the people agree to be governed. That's the consent of the governed.
Okay, so this idea of freedom was taking hold in politics. But it didn't stop there. Our next key thinker, a guy named Adam Smith, took this principle of freedom and applied it straight to economics.
Smith's big idea was that when you just let people freely chase their own economic goals in a competitive market, it actually ends up making everyone better off. This whole idea became known as laissez-faire, which is just French for let it be. Basically, government, keep your hands off the economy. This became the economic engine of classical liberalism.
So we've got political freedom and economic freedom. The idea then expanded inward to the freedom of the individual, of your own mind and your own expression. And that cause was championed by another brilliant philosopher, John Stuart Mill.
Mill's most famous idea is something we now call the harm principle, and it's actually pretty simple. He argued that you should be free to think, say, and do whatever you want, right up to the point where your actions cause harm to someone else. It's a powerful idea that became the foundation for defending everything from free speech to individual lifestyle choices.
So you take the ideas of thinkers like Locke, Smith, and Mill, and you put them all together. What you get is basically a blueprint for a whole new type of society, one built on the core idea of freedom.
So what's in this blueprint? Well, at its very core, it's all about individual liberty. It demands a government with limited power, one that gets its authority from the people. It insists that everyone is equal in the eyes of the law, and that essential freedoms, like the freedom to speak your mind, to practice your religion, and to make your own economic choices, are protected.
Okay, so that's the blueprint, the theory. But how did it actually get put into practice? Well, you just have to look around. Its influence is baked into the DNA of so many modern democracies today. Think about the U.S. Declaration of Independence. When it talks about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that is a direct echo of John Locke. Or look at France's Declaration of the Rights of Man. These documents took liberal ideas and wrote them into law, creating a model that would shape nations all over the world. You can see the legacy of liberalism everywhere today. It's in our constitutional governments that are designed to limit power. It's in the global movement to protect human rights. It's in the idea of having independent courts, market-based economies, and the separation of church and state.
But let's be clear, no idea is perfect, and liberalism is no exception. It's faced a lot of criticism over the years, and the philosophy itself has had to change and adapt. It's still part of a huge, ongoing debate.
So, what are some of the criticisms? Well, some argue that by focusing so much on the individual, liberalism can sometimes weaken the bonds that hold a community together. Others point out that totally free markets can lead to massive gaps between the rich and the poor, and a government that's too hands-off might not do enough to protect the most vulnerable people in society.
And these criticisms had a real impact. Liberalism itself started to split into different branches. You have classical liberalism, which is all about negative liberty, basically freedom from the government getting in your way. But later, social liberalism emerged. It championed positive liberty, the idea that people need the freedom to reach their potential. And that might actually require some government help, like social safety nets.
And of course, liberalism is always in conversation with other big ideas. Take conservatism, for example. Where liberalism tends to put the individual first and is often skeptical of old traditions, conservatism generally values order and community, seeing tradition and authority as really important for keeping society stable.
So, from a radical idea that challenged kings to the very foundation of modern life, liberalism has had a truly incredible journey. But the big debates about how to balance freedom with equality, about the proper role of government, they are far from over. Which leaves us with one final big question to think about. Is the story of liberty finished? Or are we still writing the next chapter?